In March 2021, at the height of the coronavirus pandemic, 4 of Europe's most powerful women sent a letter to Brussels. It included a dire warning. The pandemic had shown how much the EU depends on foreign technology, they wrote, and this needs to change. Their language was diplomatic, but the underlying message was clear. It's time to rein in big tech.
Tech giants will have to change the way they do business.
An unprecedented amount of pressure.
A day of reckoning.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I just want a yes or no answer, okay? Yes or Kachai, yes or no?
Governments around the globe have set their eyes on the world's largest tech companies. But how did big tech come under so much fire? And how did it get so big in the first place? We might not always notice it, but technology is all around us. We use it to communicate, to get information, to organize our lives. And almost all of that technology is made by private companies. This has given rise to an industry known as big tech. And within this industry, 4 companies have become especially powerful: Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, which owns Google, and Apple. In fact, they're so big now, they're known as the Big Four, or by their acronym, GAFA. Those companies actually run fairly different businesses, but what they have in common is that they all provide digital services. And those have become so ingrained in our lives that it's almost impossible to avoid them. Take me, for example. My phone is made by Apple, and when I use it to surf the internet, that traffic likely runs through servers owned by Amazon. Or let's talk about you for a second. There's a good chance you're watching this video on YouTube, which is owned by Google, and you might have come across it on Facebook. The point is, big tech is everywhere. And this has made the companies very, very rich. While the coronavirus forced many businesses to down shutters and plunged the world economy into a recession, big tech is reporting enormous profits. The stock prices of all Big Four have skyrocketed. Some, like Apple's, doubled in value since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, some would argue that this success comes with responsibility, and increasingly people are asking if
those companies are living up to that responsibility.
No, and I don't think we should expect big tech to be benevolent.
They have been trying, but it's really hard.
The answer to that depends where you are talking from.
Let's untangle this. The core criticism of big tech essentially comes down to 4 points. It's about how they protect the privacy of their users, how they can be held liable for what's happening on their platforms, how they pay their taxes, and how they treat their competitors. And when it comes to the first point, privacy, big tech really has been under fire for years. But it wasn't always that way. The birth of big tech dates back to the Silicon Valley of the late 1990s and early 2000s, when most of the companies were founded. Their missions were ambitious. The startups were out to disrupt the status quo, connect people, and give them unprecedented access to information. And when a decade later, protests spread across the Arab world, many saw that as proof for how the technology could indeed be a force for democracy. And it was. But what people did not pay much attention to at the time is how big tech actually makes money. Most of the companies got big by providing free services to their users, while in exchange collecting data about them and selling ads. And another couple of years later, the Cambridge Analytica scandal helped many understand how this very data could also be used to manipulate them. When reports emerged that a consultancy had mined information about millions of Facebook users to influence how they voted in the UK's Brexit referendum and the 2016 US election, that changed how people looked at big tech.
Especially in the United States, I think for a long time it was seen as a source of strength. But the idea that there could be, groups inside the United States that were using those alleged champions of the United States to turn, their pride into a vulnerability, I think has really hit home for a lot of Americans.
Since then, stricter data protection laws have been passed around the world. Now, the full truth is that they haven't always been enforced, but increasingly governments and courts are doing just that, and that's one reason why big tech is now feeling the heat. The second one has to do with liability. or the question of who's responsible for what's being said or done on the platforms run by big tech.
Supporters of outgoing US President Donald Trump have attempted to storm the Capitol buildings to support...
It's a question experts have been debating for years, but it only moved to the front pages when, in January 2021, following online calls for violence, a mob stormed the US Capitol.
What happened on January 6th has definitely mainstreamed this conversation, but we should not forget that even before the Capitol storming, we were already talking about liability of social media platforms when we talked about Myanmar, for instance.
Years earlier, nationalists in Myanmar had already used Facebook to foment violence against the country's Rohingya minority.
Facebook didn't even notice that because they didn't have anyone speaking the local languages. They have grown even faster than they could think about what kind of responsibility comes with that growth.
Facebook has acknowledged mistakes in Myanmar and it has pledged to do better. But increasingly, governments are saying that such pledges alone are not enough, and some, like Germany, have passed laws that now force platforms to take down hateful content quickly or face big fines. And speaking of money, there's another reason why big tech is under fire: taxes. Critics say that the companies are not paying their fair share of taxes, both when it comes to how much they're paying and where they're paying them.
Governments, both in the United States and in Europe, have given them a lot of space to go to the lowest point of taxes, right? To use the loopholes, to deploy their armies of lawyers and accountants all over the world to place profits in other constituencies than where they were actually made.
NGOs estimate that in 2020 alone, a group of 20 countries in the global south missed out on over $830 million from Facebook and over $910 million from Google's parent company, Alphabet.
Big technology companies like Google, Amazon and Facebook operating in France will soon be paying more tax.
Some countries have introduced national taxes to make the companies pay at least some taxes where people use their services. But many people believe that actually a global tax would be needed. International talks were stalled by the Trump administration. Now the Biden administration has signaled willingness to come back to the table and some hope for a deal by this summer. But if that's going to happen is far from certain. And taxes aside, some people are also saying that those companies have simply become too big, which brings us to the final issue, competition. And once again, it helps to go back in time. This man is John D. Rockefeller. Over a century ago, he was essentially what Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg are today. Rockefeller had built up an empire that controlled over 90% of oil in the US. This made him the richest man of his time. But people said his success was built on unfair practices. And in 1911, the US Supreme Court ruled to split up his corporation into 34 companies. Fast forward by 110 years and you'll hear people say very similar things about big tech. In late 2020, US Democrats said in a report that every one of the big four runs a monopoly like the kinds of monopolies we last saw in the era of oil barons. Companies, they said, effectively have to sell their products on Amazon's marketplace because they have no viable alternative. Apple, they added, gets to decide what software people use on their phones and charges supra-competitive prices to developers. Facebook bought up companies like Instagram or WhatsApp whenever they were about to become serious competitors, according to the lawmakers. And Google has favored its own services in its search engine and advertising business, the report said. The companies all reject those claims. Amazon has dismissed them as interventions in the free market. Apple says it does not overcharge developers. Facebook argues that all its acquisitions were approved by regulators at the time. And Google says that, unlike what the report says, it still has strong competitors in the market. But this has not stopped the US and other governments from launching antitrust cases against the companies. And some are even asking, why don't we go back to what was done 110 years ago and break up big tech? Make no mistake, Breaking up big tech would be incredibly difficult and messy, and it's far from certain if any of that will happen. But the debate is gathering speed.
I don't know to what extent it would solve all the problems that we currently have with big tech.
Breaking up a company is a remedy of last resort. And I think there's more in the spectrum of antitrust enforcement.
It's a threat to our democracy if any single company has so much power. And we already see how much lobbying power they have, how much money they are spending, trying to influence not just politics, but NGOs, research.
Around the world, big tech is spending more than ever on lobbying. In Brussels, for example, the Big Four spent at least 15 million euro last year alone, according to the EU's lobbying register. They have their reasons. The bloc is working on landmark legislation to both curb the market power of big tech and better hold the companies accountable for what's happening on their platforms. And it was against that backdrop that the leaders of Germany, Finland, Denmark, and Estonia sent their letter in March. Fundamental democratic values are under severe pressure, they wrote, and we need to safeguard competition and market access. It was their way of saying, time to get tough on big tech.